Welcome to the Localization Fireside Chat. I'm Robin Ayub, your host. Join me for captivating conversations with industry leaders exploring localization, translation, and global communication. Ignite your curiosity as we expand your horizons through these conversations. So let's dive in together into the Localization Fireside Chat.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Localization Fireside Chat podcast and YouTube channel. I'm Robin Ayub, the founder of this platform. And for those of you who aren't familiar with me, you can check me out on LinkedIn. There's a lot of information about me on that platform as well. And happy to connect with you if we're not connected yet. Also today, I am very honored and I'm excited to have with me Kathleen Bostick. And Kathleen and I have talked several times. We crossed paths at some point. We worked for the same company for a while. I don't know if you worked before me or after I came in, but we both worked for Linebridge, and I still work for Linebridge. You worked for Linebridge as well. You have an impressive resume in the industry. I can't wait to dive into it. It's a coffee chat, so no pressure. Just imagine both of us having a coffee at Starbucks and talking about the localization world. And this is what this conversation is about. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the episode, Kathleen. Glad to have you with me. And if you don't mind, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you, Robin, for having me. We've talked for years. We've never met in person. So one of these days it's going to happen. Well, I've been in the industry for, over 25 years. Let's just put it that way. And, unlike a lot of people who started out as translators or linguists or always had a passion for language, I accidentally stumbled into the language industry. I was in the railroad industry. So when I graduated from college, got my MBA, my first job for my MBA was a corporate management trainee at Burlington Northern Railroad in Fort Worth, Texas, because I live in Dallas. And I joined their program and learned all about moving grain. And I was a coder. So I was coding SAS and COBOL, if anybody remembers those languages. And you do, yeah. And I worked my way up the railroad. I spent 7 years at Burlington Northern first, and then I moved to Southern Pacific in California. And at the height of my career, I was in Trains magazine it was called the Big Iron Ore Heist. And it was the largest deal in the history of the railroad. It was a $150 million deal moving taconite and coal across the railroad. So when I hit that point, I looked around one day and I was still in my early 30s. And I thought, you know what, this is it. I was the most senior woman at the railroad. I actually helped them write the dress code so that women could wear pants. And I realized that I didn't look like everyone else in senior management. And so it was time to make a move. And I was bored, so I thought, okay, what's my next chapter? Back then, there were newspapers that had ads. And there was an ad in the paper for a VP of marketing and sales for a company called ILE, which everyone had acronyms that stood for International Language Engineering. And it was one of the early mom and pop startups. They were about 10 million. And I made the leap into the language industry through an ad in the paper. So just by happenstance. No, I took a pay cut to go in. I ended up in the VP of marketing was the wife. So it was a husband and wife company. And they were big in the high-tech space. So HP, back in those days, there was ITP, there was ILE, there was INTL, internationallanguage.com, Berlitz. So there were all those types of names that have gone by the wayside for the most part. And so I learned from the ground up, sitting in the VP of marketing's office, how to do localization. And in those days, it was really translation memory had just come onto the scene and everyone was afraid of it. Nobody knew what to do with it. And so it was, okay, this was transforming the industry. It reminds me a lot of what's going on now, with AI, and we'll get to that. But so she taught me very well, but I also realized within about 9 months, I'd been used to the corporate world and that this mom and pop setup was a little bit of a challenge for me. So didn't I meet SDL at a STC conference, networking? That's another, big theme that I'll have. And they said, hey, if you ever want to do something else, let us know. We'd be interested in talking to you. Well, they weren't even in the US. They were $4 million. They had 40 people and they were UK-based company. So one day on a whim, I messaged them and said, hey, I'm interested. And the message got to the CEO, Mark Lancaster, who, is a famous founder in localization. And he said, "Are you sure she doesn't just want a free trip to the UK?" so, so obviously that wasn't it. So I made my way to the UK, interviewed with those guys, with them, and I became SDL's first US employee in 1996. And my real aha moment, because I came from a company that had over 35,000 employees at the railroad, right, to a company that was kind of established in the US, to sitting in my home office one day and looking around going, okay, nobody knows me and nobody knows SDL. And so if I don't pick up this phone and make cold calls, I'm not going to have a job. And so I looked at it that way. And the other way, I thought, you know what? Somebody's funding my own business. So here I've got a salary and now I can make my own way. So that's really my start in the industry and how I got started with SDL. And, I think when you're young, sometimes you just make impulsive decisions. And that was completely an impulsive decision, but I'm delighted to where it led me.
Well, everybody tells me, if you categorize the entire population of our industry from an employee perspective or business owner's perspective, the common thread that I hear is how accidental, the transformation from one industry to the localization industry has been for them. And, for me personally, it's the same idea. I'm not sure if I told you the story before. I was coming back from a trip. I was in the tech business, similar to you, and you were talking about COBOL. I was coding in COBOL, doing all that stuff. And I was coming back from a trip in the US, and the gentleman was sitting beside me on the plane, happened to run a small company called Lexitech International at the time, based in Moncton, New Brunswick, Canada. And he convinced me to become his VP of sales. And the company was tiny. It was like a couple of $1 million company. And here's me. I was working for a large conglomerate telecom company. So I took the dive, and maybe I had too much gin on that flight. I have no idea. But and the rest is history. That's 21 years ago. So yeah, you're right. And so you either go to university, you study a lingo, you have passion for that since you were a kid, or you would probably drift to it or find your way to the industry through other means, as you did, and as I did, and as many other people have done. Now, throughout your history, throughout your career, you've dealt with many customers on the customer side, partner side, etc. And today, when we talk about global content, can you explain to the audience, the global content in terms of how do we take a content from a local to global, and what are the benefits associated with taking content to global?
So, I think this is something that a lot of companies struggle with because they want to know what their ROI is. And they don't know. So they do their content in English and they hope. And you think after all these years and all the research out there, if you remember that long time ago, Common Sense Advisory, can't read, won't buy, right? And people realize, okay, you know what? If I'm going to go to Germany, I need to have my content in German. And that's really a pretty straightforward process. I think we've all honed that pretty well between project managers, and then we've got translation memories, we've got style guides, we have machine translation that's, been trained for these companies. And I think it's a pretty straightforward process. But I think what's happening now is, now that we've introduced AI into the mix, it's kind of causing some disruption. It's a disruptive technology, right? And so I don't know if any of us know actually where that's going to take us, because we can't see into the future. But there's a lot of smart people out there in the industry that are diving deep into it and looking at how they can use it in the process. And as a matter of fact, I just finished reading, Argos just put out a supplement to multilingual computing that's going to be available at LokeWorld, and also will be available, I think it's available online. There's a link right now. And it's under their Global Ambitions brand. And it's all about content and AI. And you probably know Tim Arata. Tim Arata's been around forever. Mm-hmm. He was at Apple for a long time as running their localization and MT. And he's got an article in there, which is really, really insightful. And it really talks about, we still are going to need translators. We're still going to need linguists. It's just going to be up-leveling their job. It's going to be a new job. I mean, you still need people annotating data. You still need subject matter experts. You're still going to need, it's just going to be a higher level job than just taking text from English to another language. And, I don't know about you, but I've started experimenting with some of the platforms out there. And
Sure.
I'd be interested to hear what you have to say, but I am absolutely fascinated and blown away by what I've been able to get out of them. But then I also see the downfalls.
That's right. So we had a conversation yesterday at the ALC, and the question was, what is the biggest threat to some of the association at the time, language industry associations? And you know that I'm the president of the Canadian Language Industry Association. So in my capacity, I was answering that particular question. And one of them, it was the technologies that we are adopting right now, and people are not yet fully understanding the risk and benefits of these technologies, but they're jumping on the bandwagon before proper assessment has been done. And basically, that is creating a bit of a risk because, yes, adoption, and I'm not talking about our industry, I'm talking about the consumer of our industry. So that would be the customers in this case. So adopting this technology too quick without proper assessment of benefits and risks analysis, proper risk analysis on it, it's going to cause damage. It's going to cause damage in lowering the quality of the communication. The content is being put out there, be it generated or translated, it doesn't matter. It's going to cut corners in many aspects of how we communicate as a society, not just necessarily our customers. And proper analysis and proper transformation and proper training to how you use these tools are absolutely necessary. And the potential for these tools is absolutely great, but you have to know how to use them. And if you use them in the wrong way, it's going to cause more damage, more harm than benefits. And that's going to affect everybody in the wrong intended consequences, obviously. Give an example, for instance, if you go to generative AI and you ask AI to write you an email, and you cut and paste it, put it into an email and send it without reading it and sending it out to somebody, it automatically can tell you it's full of mistakes, not necessarily mistakes linguistically, maybe, but maybe the context is missing, maybe the idea that you're trying to convey is not correct, etc. So there is as you mentioned earlier, there's always a need for a human to be in the middle, to review, to harness, to tweak, but it's a great assistance. Like, I'm using them on a day-to-day basis. My productivity level is gone up tremendously, but I'm always in the center of how I use these tools. And there's many of them out there. It's increasing productivity. It's allowing me to do more with less. Absolutely phenomenal if you use them in the right way. Obviously, there is a right and wrong way to use any tool, but this is my interpretation of it.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And the prompt piece is fascinating on how and I know there are some really good courses out there now. Coursera has some courses on prompt engineering that some of my colleagues have taken, and it's on my list to take because I think we always have to embrace and learn new things, right? We can't be stuck in the mud and say it's not going to change. So embrace what's happening. Okay, I'm late in my career, but I'm very interested in taking this class. And what I realize is how I ask it really is how it results. So you need a human to be, first of all, know what to ask, right? Mm-hmm. And so, for example, I was working on an RFP for a healthcare company. And so I asked ChatGPT, how can interpretation decrease costs and increase patient satisfaction in healthcare? That's a pretty complicated prompt. So I have to know what to ask, right? The answer was absolutely spot on, I have to say. Incredible. But it was also had no personality to it. It was very factual. So it was a great piece to then add into the presentation and then humanize it with examples. And that's how I found it very, very beneficial. And it cut down the time of me researching, how is this going to decrease costs, to, okay, I've got this back in 30 seconds, and now it's going to take me an hour to build a presentation versus maybe 4 hours. So I'm impressed with using it that way. But I don't think there's any possible way at this point or the foreseeable future that you don't need some type of human eyes on it, as whether a subject matter expertise or even in the prompt piece. Maybe someday you can train the prompts, but right now you still need humans to do the prompts.
And if we turn it around a little bit and we take a look at these technologies and the impact of these technologies on enabling humanity to communicate more with their own language, I would imagine, and I don't know, still need to be proven, there's no reports on this yet, where we have content as not just in English or in French or whatever demographic we're referring to, that because of lack of a human effort to translate, we don't have enough translators, everybody agrees to that. Now that with the tools that we currently have in place, that this specific content is now enabled to cheaply, mind you, may not be as to the highest quality out there, but at least it conveys it into another language. So example, you're sitting on a reams of data sitting in a company A, and because of lack of resources, I don't have enough staff or I don't have enough translators to do the job. Now with AI, you are able to take that content and put it into another language and give people access to that content. Am I correct with that theory, or this is out to lunch?
No, I agree with that. And you just hit on one of my hot buttons, which is language access. And not just in terms of translation, but in terms of my youngest daughter is deaf. So language access has been a challenge all of our life in getting an interpreter for her. Just access to language at the table when there's a group of people and her being able to understand. So what I'm hoping is that this new technology is going to allow people with disabilities, such as deaf, blind, hard of hearing, that they can have easy access, so that they're on a bus and they're all of a sudden the bus driver is saying the next stop is so-and-so and there's nothing written anywhere, or they're on a plane and there's an emergency. She always has to ask the person next to her, hey, what did they say? Can you tell? I'm deaf, so can you help me understand what they say? All right, so if we can have automated real-time interpretation, a text where you speech to text, reading it and understanding the message with good accuracy, that is not going to take anyone's job away. That's just going to allow access to people who haven't had access, and even, as far as like taking it to the next level, when she makes a doctor's appointment, the minute she asks for an interpreter, all of a sudden those appointments are full, which is just not appropriate. It's not ADA compliance, right? There's ways to mediate that, but it's a real problem. So language access is something for everyone of any language that this is really important to help them with.
I do believe that there is a huge amount of benefits on every facet of our lives with AI, specifically when it comes to languages, like in the education sector. I know I've talked to Carrie Fisher on one of the episodes, and one of the topic was teaching your kids languages at the early stage of their life and the impact that would have on their career down the road, on this society, on many aspects. And that's a fascinating topic as well. Most North American kids, adults, etc., most of them, they probably know one language. Now that demographic is changing with immigration, etc. But for the most part, most North American knows one language, and changing that enables a great deal of communication on a variety of level, understanding of other cultures, embracing other cultures, etc. Because once you understand something, you less likely to, have misunderstandings about things. And the other thing too is AI is doing right now, and I concur with you 100%. Is it's creating opportunities in our industry. So our industry views technology since the beginning of the days, I guess, since the 80s and 70s, as a threat. That's the immediate reaction that we have but very few, they see it as an opportunity and they create an opportunity out of it. And then all of a sudden it's a growing business opportunity. I interviewed Oz Zakowski from deepdup.ai, and the sole purpose of this company is developed an AI application to take, movies from the big studios in Hollywood and convert them and dub them to a sub-Saharan languages. Otherwise, the big studios are not going to be dubbing them to those languages. So using AI tool now that we have these entertainment mediums, if you will, accessible by hundreds of languages that they did not have access to it before in their own language. I mean,
right, which is amazing, because there's no ROI for human translation. But when now you've got technology, what's 100%. Interesting is one of the industry events that I've been going to forever is Loc World, and I'm sure you've been to some. And I was the very first sponsor of Loc World when it was web globalization. Ulrich and his team have really built a really great legacy in the language industry. But if you look at the Loc World that's coming up in a couple weeks, all the sponsors are language technology or technology companies. That is a huge shift. In the past, it used to be language services companies, but now you've got companies like Phrase, Intento, XTM, all of them are up there, and they've got some twist to AI integration that they're going to be talking about. And who are they talking to? Well, 60% of the conference attendees are LSPs, and then 40% on the client side. So everyone in that audience is their client.
Correct. And that's quite the dramatic shift, if I may, because in some of the Loc World, well, the one I attended, it was in Montreal, I guess, quite a long time ago. I noticed.
I remember, I was there.
You were there. I remember. You were there, right?
Yes. Yes.
I remember the audience was completely LSPs. And, the draw that we were trying to get is get more customers in so they can be engaged in a more better conversation when it comes to how we talk together. Now technology is coming in. But what has changed in between that time and now is our industry went through a financial transformation, meaning that our industry now is a lot of PE money is coming in. A lot of PE money is private equity firms are coming in and buying these companies and trying to improve them. Some people view the PE money, it depends on which side of the spectrum you're on in our industry. Some people view that aspect of the investment money coming into the industry as negative. Some people see it as positive. I'd like to see the glasses half full all the time. So in this case, I'm finding that the PE firms has a great impact because it enabled us to think a little differently how we view our business from the inside out, meaning that we have to be more efficient. We have to do more with less. There are not many people are going to university study linguistic degrees to the amount of what we need as a global spectrum. So I feel like what you just said about the amount of technology companies in our industry are direct result of somebody from outside coming in and saying, you need to do better.
Did you see that it was just announced, I think this week, that there a TMS that was originally called Cordoba, which I wasn't really familiar with, never had a lot of traction. They changed their name to writer.com and they got 100 million in funding because they have a private cloud AI piece of technology with AI. But that's just mind blowing. So all the TMS companies, TMS has just become, it's a TMS, right? I mean, it's become very generic. Everyone's got a TMS. It's just normal. How do you differentiate your brand? But these guys decided that, and I think it's a female CEO and founder, decided that, we're going to go this route and change their name to writer.com and got into the content business. How brilliant is that? I mean, that's definitely something to watch. 100 million. That's a huge investment.
And you bring a very good point because CSA research says that we have about 19,000 companies, give or take, in the industry globally. Now that's, the old 80-20 rules always there. 80% of the business at the top 20 companies and the rest of them are smaller to medium-sized organization, which is fine. So if you were to say, these companies most of them are in the legacy space, I would call it legacy space because that's in today's age. There is the old traditional way of doing things. Some people still prefer to do things in their own way, which is fine. And there is the adoption of new technology, do things less, do things more of it. And there is a huge opportunity in that space yet to convert, to do better. And I talked to Michelle Lopez from E2F on one of these episodes, and this is a specific example of how you take a company from your legacy services to figure out what other services I can do with my organization and offer those services to the market and be profitable at it. You got to go where the customers pay money. And since I entered the industry, I always said, if you're taking a project of any sort, the company's doing, like some pharmaceutical company launching a website or brand new marketing campaign, etc., the amount of money they throw at this is huge. It's amazing. And meanwhile, the localization piece of it is a very tiny piece that goes somewhere before publishing. So after you produce what you need to produce, and you need to now, we need to translate this. We need to put it in many languages. Okay, so you send it to localization. So let's say as an example, and I don't know, they spend $100 million on a marketing campaign, and they spend, $1 million on translating it, or not even. Then we're only getting 1 million out of 100. As that's the size of the pie for the industry. I think we should take a look at what else we can do, what else can we offer, and increase the size of the pie, increase the wallet share.
I think you're spot on with that. One of my colleagues who's on the client side of the business, I actually mentored her a couple of years ago, and she's now with a big client. And we were talking about how her job, she used to be on the LSP side, and now she's on the client side, and how, unfortunately, localization is a real fight for her to get to. Like, she's got so many other things going on with the products that localization is still an afterthought. But if it's a part of the whole, we're going global, we're creating it originally, knowing that German is where we're creating the content, right? That it's originally, so this whole AI piece, once we've got a corpus of data, right now we know ChatGPT only has 20% in other languages, but once that's built out, that's something all the LSPs are going to help build out. We're doing data annotation. We're doing all those things, right, to get that content in there. Then you're going to have a much better chance of creating original content in country versus having to translate it after the fact. But what she told me was she sees the project manager's role morphing into the data AI piece. They can easily, it's a very similar skill set, right? They're annotating data. They're working with linguists all over the world. Somebody still needs to say a dog is a chien in French. Somebody still needs to translate a border collie of a dog into the French border collie. Somebody has to still annotate all those things. So those translators' jobs are still very important. And then having the subject matter expertise in those areas, being able to add value of, I realize that this, under the regulations, we can't actually say that in this country. So it could be generated by AI, but somebody still has to have the expertise to say it works or not, right? So I think I'm really excited. And, I wanted to talk a little bit about LoqueWorld because I'm passionate about it. I've been going for so many years, and I love it for two things. I love it for the content, but I love it for the people. The relationships that we build in this industry over the years are what keeps so many of us around for so long, Yeah. And we change and we go to other LSPs, we move around, but we're still friends. When I left SDL, I was at SDL for 9 years, the first round, and then I went to Lionbridge for 8. And I loved my colleagues at Lionbridge, but I'd run out of opportunity at Lionbridge, and it was time to go do something else. And so I realized SDL was in a bad stage at that point. And I reached out to the CEO and I said, "You're not in any, I haven't seen you guys in any RFPs lately. What's happening? I mean, do you need somebody to come help you? I'm happy to come help you, help consult, but what's going on with SDL?" Well, within 2 days, I had an offer letter to come back and run North America. And, you have to make your own success, right? You have to be the one that makes things happen. So relationships. So I'm now at SDL. I'm running North America. I have operations. I've got sales. I've got a whole lot of stuff to clean up. And within a year, though, I've got, I want to say 2 years, 40 colleagues from Lionbridge over with me because we had such a great group of people, but they were looking for something that was going to excite them, something new. I like to fix things. I like if something's broken, if something's just running smooth and everything, get somebody else to do maintenance, right? Fix things. And people like to fix things and make things better and see something go from good to great. So I really believe the whole networking piece and the relationships that we have in the industry are so important. You don't want to burn bridges. And that's one of the reasons that I love some of the industry events, like a LoqueWorld. And I do want to say something about my panel at LoqueWorld, though. One of the areas that I've been really passionate about is women leadership. And it's probably my history. I come from a family of 5 girls, and we were all Eanes. We were Maureen, Kathleen, Noreen, Eileen, and Colleen. So it's good Irish Catholic family. My dad always kidded around and said the next 2 were going to be chlorine and gasoline. Thank goodness we didn't have any more, right? And then I have 2 daughters and I have 2 granddaughters. And so I've always been aware of this kind of discrepancy in pay and, status and all that. And at the railroad, for example, when I won that huge deal, $150 million deal, my team and I, the guy that was on the coal side, I found out was making twice as much as me. Okay. And so when I gave my notice that I was going to leave the industry and they magically matched the salary. But that didn't matter. Once your brain, you've already left, there's no reason to go back. And it's still the best decision I ever made. But, promoting women and leadership and doing things that allow people to grow, because let's face it, this industry, I have to look at the stats I saw recently, but it's like something like 70% of the industry is women. We're talking about services, project manager, translation, all those pieces. Yet at the top of all the super agencies, there are no women CEOs running them.
Yep. And that's a very valid point that you mentioned there, Kathleen. In this channel is like when I started, I'm a big supporter of women in localization, and every time I chance I have or to get somebody on, I already had Carrie twice on this channel, and always good to talk to her. And I don't know like why, this is a longer debate as to why the inequality, I would say, and the reason for the inequality, what is it? And skills, they are the same. I just don't understand why there is inequality in this, but it is there, it exists, and we should absolutely stand up against it and make sure that people are equally treated. It doesn't matter what.
Yeah, and I think it's up to those in senior positions and hiring positions. But so I'm hosting a panel. I went to Ulrich and I said, I think it'd be really fascinating to have a panel with women CEOs in the industry. Because there's only 18 of them in the top 100. And of those 18, I think, and my stats might be a little bit off, I've got CSA getting me the correct ones, but there's only 2 that were not founders. So it seems like the fastest way to be a CEO in localization is to be a founder of the company or a co-founder, and you become CEO, right?
Start something.
Yeah. So 2 that are on my panel, Veronique Oskaya, who I'm sure you've known, and we actually met at Lionbridge, and she's CEO of Argos. She's the only outside recruited CEO that has been a CEO twice. So she was first CEO at Language Wire. She started out as CRO and then became CEO, sold that company, and then was recruited to Argos. So she's CEO of Argos now going on 3 years. Silke from Yonkers, she is an outside CEO recruited. I worked with her at SDL. She ran EMEA when I ran North America. Well, she got recruited as an outsider to be a CEO. So she's on my panel. So those 2 women are on my panel. And then I've got Mila Govina from Masterword, and she's actually a founder CEO. So I think it's going to be really interesting to have different perspectives, but I want to ask bigger questions, is why do you have to be a founder to be a CEO? It takes a lot of guts and hard work and something I never had to be a founder of a successful company. That's a whole different path, right? But coming in and being a CEO, being recruited is different. So why aren't more being recruited? And if I go back to the railroad industry, which I look at as like way behind us, technology, innovation, of the class 1 carriers, there's 5 class 1 carriers. They have 2 female CEOs running this old school railroad industry. And here we are with no one in the super agencies as a woman CEO. So I think part of it has to do with us, even us women hiring. So for example, when I was at SDL, I had a phenomenal team and I knew I was going to retire and leave. And I had built up a great bench of VPs. They were all men. So I was part of the problem. I never even thought about that till I left. I had not recruited or hired any women to be in my succession plan. And so Natalie Kelly spoke on a webinar yesterday, and she had that same realization at HubSpot. Her HubSpot team told her, "We don't have any diversity on the team. You're the only woman on the team." And she said, "Oh, wow." So that made me think too about what could have I done to have helped in that. I mean, you always want to choose the best person for the job, but are you looking at a big pool of candidates? Do you need to look at a wider pool of candidates? Do you need to recruit from the outside? Because I'm sure there were really good candidates that I could have put in one of those VP slots to be a successor. And so I think if we all look at that as we talk about diversity and equity, right? We look at that piece and say, okay, we've got 5 interviews, we've got 2 jobs. Let's see what we've got as candidates and purposely look for expertise in those areas. But anyway, I'm passionate about women leadership and how I can help them, the next gen. I mean, we've got to get somebody in one of these super agency. Who's going to be the first one to have a woman CEO, right? Who is it?
Yeah, that's great. And I'm hosting a panel discussion on global resources, and that would be one of the topic would be tackling. I've got like 4 individuals participating in this. That's coming up, I guess, next week or the week after. I can't remember now. But yeah, this is a very important topic that we're going to continue bring up to the surface here. So we're coming to the end of our time on this chat, Kathleen. Excellent feedback and excellent chat with you. Always good to talk and exchange ideas. What do you like your final thoughts on this conversation to be for our audience? If somebody interested in reaching out to you, how do they do it? What kind of services you're offering to them? What would be of interest to somebody to call you?
So right now I'm an independent consultant, and I'm always available to, I'm a mentor as just part of my give back, right? I like to help women get to the next level. So one of the things that really matters to me is helping other women. And so I'm always available to do that. And I'm always, people can find me on LinkedIn and at Local, of course. But I think one of the big takeaways is, if you're in a position or you're at a company and you're not happy, you're in charge of your own destiny. And as Paulette Hadot from Royal Caribbean said in one of my leadership presentations I had, if your boss doesn't think you're the best thing since sliced bread, go find a new boss. You are in charge of your destiny. If you're not happy, go do something that makes you happy. So that's how I'm going to finish.
You heard it here first, guys. If your boss doesn't think that you're the best thing ever, go find a new boss. I love that reverse psychology. This is my best one for today. I'm going to coin that.
We all have choices, right?
We all have choices, indeed. So thank you so much for being part of this conversation today. I hope you find time and to come back again, and always good to have you on this conversation, on this podcast, and always good to see you again. And good luck with Local World and everything else that you're doing, and wish you the best of success, Kathleen. Thanks again.
You too, Robin. I enjoyed it, and I hope to see you soon. Cheers.
Indeed. Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in to the Localization Fireside Chat. Take the warmth of knowledge and renewed cultural passion with you. Keep exploring, stay curious, and until next time, this is Robin Ayub. Keep those global conversations